Welcome back to the Arbitrary YouTube channel. In today's class, I'm going to be learning how to make this beautiful e-pad that we see here. It's a very simple tutorial and it's going to just give a fuller effect just like we have here, and it's beginner friendly. If this is something you would like to learn, kindly stay tuned to the end of this tutorial. Thank you. Okay, so to make this hip and butt pad, I have drafted my actual skirt. Okay, I'm working with this Ankara fabric, and this is my lining. So my lining is a little bit shorter than my fabric because I want the hem to have the Ankara as well on the lining part. So you can see I made it shorter by around 2 inches. So this is the actual fabric that I'm working with, and I have notched that area. Okay, this is my zipper allowance, so I'll just set this aside. It's just a basic skirt. The only difference is that on the hip area, because we are going to be padding it, I added half an inch to my actual hip measurement. Okay, I'm using this half-inch foam, so I added half an inch on fold. Remember, this fold is 4, 2 for front and 2 for back, which means by the time you had half an inch plus half an inch in 4 places, you're going to have 2 inches extra. So if your waist is 40, if your hip is 44, it means you're going to be working with 46 inches. If your hip is 42, it means you add 2 inches and make it 44 inches. So that's the only difference that I have on my hip area, and that is for my main bodies. For my lining, I'm going to cut it as I'm cutting my pad, because I'm sewing the pad to the lining, so I want it to be exactly the same thing. You're not going to run into problem when you want to turn it, because the waistline and the hem line remains the same. The only difference you're going to be having is on the hip by half an inch. So I hope we'll understand that. So now we move straight to our padding. I have drafted my front and back panel. Okay, so I'm going to use this red marker so that we can see it well. This is my waistline, this is my hip, and this is the hem. Okay, and this is for the front. And then for the back, this is my waist, this is my hip, and this is my under butt. Okay, this is where your butt goes in. I'm going to show us this on the mannequin. Okay, this is just when you're coming from your waistline, where it just enters. That's the underbutt, and this is the hem, and this is my zipper allowance for the back. So now the back has an underbutt. For the front, we're just going to be padding the hip area, but for the back, we are padding both the hip and the butt. So that's why we need this measurement. So I will set the back aside now and work on the front first. Okay, so for the front now, what I'm going to do to my basic skirt measurement, and this skirt draft that we have here does not have an allowance. Okay, we are going to be cutting the pad from this, so we don't have an allowance. But on my main bodies, both lining and main fabric, I have 1 inch seam allowance on it. So on the waistline here, I'm going to come down by 2 inches. This skirt is going to have like half an inch band, so I'm going to use 1 inch to sew the half an inch to sew. It's going to have 1 inch band, sorry, so I'm using half an inch here to sew this to my skirt. So that's why I'm coming down. Normally you can come down by 1.5 inches, but I'm adding that half an inch allowance to it. That's why I'm coming down by 2 inches on this point. On the hem of my skirt as well, I'm going to come up by 2 inches. Okay, 2 to 2.5 inches is fine. I'm coming up by 2 inches, which is here. And then on the hip line, remember this is my center front. Okay, on the side area, I'm going to come by 5 inches. We're just padding the hip for the front. So these are the points that I have: 2 inches from the waistline, 5 inches inwards on the hip, and then 2 inches upward from the hem. So after having these 3 points, what you just need to do is to take your curved ruler, and then you're going to connect all of this together, so you get a really nice curve that is going to give you something really realistic. Okay, you don't want it to be looking somehow. So from there now, I'm trying to make sure that my curve blends as well, and then I'm going to connect just like this to what I have coming from the upper part. Okay, you can see. So this is the front. So now you label this part, because it's looking very similar. So you can label this up, okay, and then you label this part down, so that you don't get confused. So this is for the front. Now for the back, I'm going to bring in my pattern again. Okay, so just like we did, remember we are sewing the front and back together. So I'm going to be going down by 2 inches for the on the waistline. The length has to be the same, and then on the hem as well, I'm going to come up by 2 inches. Okay, so here on my underbutt, from this part, from this side, not the center, from this side, I'm going to go inwards by 4 inches to 4.5 inches. Okay, remember this does not have allowance, so I'm working with 4.5 inches, which is here. And then on my zipper allowance, I'm going to come in by 1.5. I'm just going to come in by 1 inch. By the time I shape it, it's going to give me the 1.5 inches that I need. So now I'm coming in by 1 inch. So what I did was to come down by 2 inches on the waistline. On the hem, I came up by 2 inches. On the underbutt, I came in by 4.5 inches. And then on the zipper allowance, this, now you are going to remember all these measurements, we are taking it from the side, but for the hem, for the hip, you are going to take it from your zipper allowance like this inwards, because we are putting back, we are padding the butt area, not just the hip this time. So now from my zipper allowance, I'm going to come in by 1 inch. So what you're going to do again is to connect all of these points together using your curved ruler. So I'm going to connect from my hem to my underbutt, and then from the underbutt again, I'm going to connect to the hip. Okay, so you just find something nice, and then if it's giving you a funny shape, what you just need to do is to come here and then you blend everything very well. What we are trying to do, you can see how it's going in here. We are trying to imitate what the butt looks like. Okay, so you make sure you blend it that way, and then from your hip, now you're going to connect it to your waist again. So now I'm just getting a curve that's going to give me something really nice. So now I'm connecting like this. So after connecting like this, these sharp points, I'm just going to use my curved ruler to blend everything, to blend this and this together, so that I don't have anything sharp. And by the time I blend it, it's going to give me the 1.5 inches that I intend to come in with earlier on. Okay, so this is what I have. And then if you measure from your zipper allowance area, now you're going to have around 1.5 inches. So you can see, so now we are not working with this again. So this is what we are going to work with. So that is all you need to do. So what you're just going to do now is to go ahead and cut this on your foam. But before we cut this, I'm going to label this part up as well, and then I'll label this part as my down, and then you can put an arrow, just something to make this easy for you. So that's the back, and this is the front. So now what I'm going to do now is to take my scissors and cut this out, and then I'll go ahead and cut it on my foam as well. So I've gone ahead to cut this now, and then I'm just going to remove it. So this is what the pad looks like. So here again, I'm going to indicate this to be my side, because that's what I'm sewing together. So you don't want, especially for this, it looks very similar, so you don't want to mix that up. So now this is the front, and you can see that we are just padding the hip for the front, but for the back we have the hip, and then we are adding our butt to it. So now I'll take my foam, and then I'll cut exactly what I have here. So I'll cut 2 of this and 2 of this for each side of my skirt. Okay, so I've gone ahead to cut it, and after cutting it, you can see that I labeled the foam as well, so that I don't get it mixed up. So this is the front and this is the back. So this foam is quite thick, as we can see. The next thing I'm going to do now is to take my scissors now, and then I'm going to trim it. Okay, so you're just going to trim it carefully so that you have something really flat. This will not work because it's too thick. It's not going to blend in your skirt very well, so you have to trim it to the barest minimum. So be careful not to cut your foam together with it, so I mean not to destroy the foam. So you can see now that I'm reducing the height that I have here. So you just trim from here, and then you blend it inward. You trim from here and blend inward as well. So that's what I'm just doing. So I'll just keep trimming like that till I have what I am comfortable with. Okay, so I've gone ahead to trim it. As you can see, you just make sure that it is lower here, and then it just goes higher like that, and then you balance everything up. So the next thing now is to cover our pad. So I'm going to be covering mine with this paper stay that I have here. You can also use an hair stay, so this helps smoothing all these rough edges that you have. It's just going to smoothen it up for you. So I'm going to cut 2 for each. Remember, there is a gum on your interfacing, so it's just going to glue together by the time you iron it. So I'll cut 2 for each of these pads now, and then I'll iron it now and bring it back to show us what we have. Okay, so I've gone ahead to wrap it with my stay, and then I just trimmed it down. So I just wrote my indications again. So what you're going to do now is to go ahead to sew it round to hold it before you sew it together. I don't even have power. I had to use a stove iron, so you can see that it is not well attached. So you need to iron it very well so that everything will be in one piece, and then you're going to sew all around. So now I'll take it now and then sew around it. Okay, so I've gone ahead to sew it down, as you can see. So I just left a little allowance on my stay. Okay, especially if you are using a stay, it's very strong to sew it together. Remember, we did not add allowance to our pattern when we were drafting this, so that I will have exactly what I need. So what I'm going to do now, because you have labeled it, makes it easier for you, so you know which one goes with the other. So you just match the upper part together, and then you go ahead and sew it on your sewing machine. You do the same thing for the other side as well. Okay, so this is the up, and this is the arrow indicating where you're sewing to. So you just place it like this and then sew. So I have joined it now, as you can see, and this is what my pad is looking like. This is the upper part, and this is the other side. So this is for the right, and this is for the left. So there are actually ready-made pads that you can buy, but you can actually make it yourself just like this, and it's very simple. So there is no reason why you should not just go with this. So the next thing we need to do now is to go ahead and fix this to our lining. We're going to be sewing this to the lining, not the main bodies. I have joined my lining together. I have held my dart. So now I'll be working with my side seam allowance. Remember, my allowance was 1 inch. So now you can just go ahead and press open your allowance, because that's what you're going to sew it. So remember, this is the back and this is the front. So you're just going to match this this side seam. Remember, this was our side on the pattern as well. This is the side where we joined it together. So this side here, now you look for the upper part where I wrote up, and then you come down by the 2 inches that we came down when we wanted to start drafting this. So I have marked the 2 inches. You want it to be on the exact point where you marked on your pattern. So now what I'm going to do now is to match this seam that I have here. I'm going to match it to this part. Okay, that's what you need to do. Okay, so like I was saying, you just need to make sure that this center line matches your side seam as well, so that you can just sew on it. You're not going to have extra seam. You're just going to use the seam that you used to join your skirt as well. So you can pin it down to have exactly that. I'm going to open up this seam as well. So I'm going to pin it down now, and then just go ahead and sew this center line. Okay, so I have gone ahead to sew it, and you can see that it is exactly on that side seam line. Okay, I have sewn for the 2 sides, and this is what it looks like on the inside. So the next thing we're going to do now is to go ahead now and sew around this. So when you are sewing this, you need to drag your skirt so that you don't have anything packing. So you drag it like this. Okay, make sure everything is straight, just like this, and then you sew around it. So you can just do this with your pin. You can just stretch a little bit, and then you hold down with your pin. Just make sure that you don't have anything packing. That is what we are trying to do here. So I'm going to pin it around and take it to the sewing machine. It's just a normal regular stitch, and then I'm going to sew on this seam that I already have all around, just to hold this pad together with your fabric. You can also tack it, but it's a lining and you're using matching color of thread, so I don't see any reason why you cannot just sew. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew it. You can also use your hemming gum to just glue them together. What we just want is for this part to be together with this lining. So I have sewn it. As you can see now, it is glued together. Okay, I'm here to sew this part, but this part is completely sewn, so you can see now that it is held together. It's not going to shift. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and sew the other side as well. You drag as you sew, just sew around like this, and make sure you let your fabric be on that part. You don't want it to affect your you don't want your fabric to be packing. So now after doing that, what you just need to do is to lay your skirt, your lining on your skirt. Remember, the lining is shorter, so I'm going to sew the hem first so that I can drag my fabric. So after sewing the hem, I'll go ahead and join the side and leave this upper part open to turn it so that I can add my I want to add band to this, so I'll just fix my band and the waistline. So I've gone ahead to turn it with my lining, and you can see a little bit of the Ankara is just showing because the lining is shorter. And this is our pad. You can see how neat this is looking. So what you just need to do now is to go ahead and iron this neatly. Okay, so you can see how it is on the side. You want it to be round like this. You don't want any sharp points on your pad for it to be realistic. So this is what it looks like now. So what I'm going to do now is to go ahead and cut my band, and then I'm going to fix the band to the waistline so that it can be neat as well. Then after that, I'm going to I have gone ahead to fix my band. As you can see, everything is neat both in and out now. So you just need to iron this very well, and then the last thing to do is to fix our zipper. So I used 1 inch for my zipper allowance, and then I've used like 1/4 of an inch to turn it, so I have about 0.75 for my zipper allowance. But you can just go ahead and fold again to reconfirm your measurements if you want. So you just fold like this, and then you match everything up, then you just measure from here so that you can reconfirm the measurements that you're working with. But if you take your measurements right, you should just know what you're going to use. So the next thing now is to bring my zipper. So this is the zipper that I'm going to work with. So you just mark where your zipper is going to stop, and then you sew the rest close, or you can just leave some for your slit. So I'll go ahead and fix my zipper now, and then we'll wear the skirt to see what it looks like. Okay, so this is what our skirt looks like now. You can see our pad. I can see how realistic this is looking. So this is what it looks like on the back, and this is what the other side looks like. So this is what you want to achieve by the time you are done. For the front, you can see my pad stops around here. I just measured 5 inches, so if you want to extend it, you can do that as well. And then for the back, this is where the pad stops. You can see that it gets to the butt area almost at the zipper line, because we went in by 1.5 inches from our center back. And this is your underbutt. This is the underbutt area where we curved it in, which is here. You can see the pad. I can feel it from here, and my pad stops around here. So you can see how simple it is to make this and how beautiful it turned out. What you want to achieve is something really realistic. Okay, something that's not going to be so obvious that you padded your skirt, at the same time it's going to give you this effect that you have on your hip line. I hope you enjoyed making this beautiful tutorial with me. If you enjoyed this, let us know in the comment section. Like, comment, and subscribe to our channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. So before I go, let's not forget that once you cinch your waist very well, it makes your hip padding come out more beautiful because you have a tinier waist, thereby showcasing your hip more.